Coming back at you with Who's That Raider? Coming up here in just a moment, I'm going to tell you who that Raider is. If you guessed it's Thayer Munford, you are correct. My name is Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up here on today's show, I'm going to tell you why Thayer Munford is a Raiders player that could potentially be traded or cut after June 1st. If you don't know the June 1st deadline around NFL schedule, it's a major, major day where there's going to be teams that decide to move on from players from a contract standpoint. I'm not sitting up here saying that there's going to be multitude of NFL teams looking to bring Munford in, but because so many other NFL teams will make moves, could that mean that Munford could get another opportunity down the road? So I first want to start this show off by saying that there was a report earlier last week that Thayer Munford could be the odd one out. And when you first saw that report, I don't really think it surprised anybody. I know it didn't really surprise me because I think every single Raiders fan that's going to sit up here is going to go, well, yeah, I could kind of see that Munford was going to be one of the offensive linemen. That could be the odd man out. He wasn't participating in practice drills last week, and the reasoning was left undisclosed. I'll be honest with you. When I hear undisclosed, when I hear odd man out, and I hear a player that, let's face it, needs to be participating in as many drills as humanly possible, when you add all of those three things into the equation, the number one thing that pops into my mind is, okay, are the Raiders potentially planning on moving on from Thayer Munford, or is Thayer Munford himself going to ask to be released by the Las Vegas Raiders, and he doesn't want to risk injury? So that is why I wanted to be able to make today's show. So coming up here, I'm going to be breaking down and illustrating a little bit more in depth of why I think that Munford could be on his way out as soon as June 1st. Let's go to the very first reason here. And I know I've brought up this reasoning a lot this year. I know I've brought up this reason a lot over the past few years, but it's because when you have a new regime, that new regime wants to take out the old and bring in the new. And Munford was drafted by McDaniels and Dave Ziegler in the 7th round of the 2022 NFL Draft, and he's gone through 3 different head coaches. Munford has had 4 different offensive line coaches. And actually, you could look at those 2 things right there, and there's going to be an NFL team out there if a team does want to trade for him. And I'll talk about some potentially interested teams a little bit later on in today's show. But teams are going to look at that, and they're going to go, this was somebody at Ohio State that some people thought could go in round 1. Different head coaches, different offensive lines. That is really difficult to make your name in the NFL, on top of the fact that you're also a 7th round pick. Let's go to the next reason, and I actually think that this is probably the biggest reason of why Munford himself could ask for, hey, I'm just looking for a new opportunity. He is in the final year of his contract. If cut or traded, it doesn't matter. The Raiders saved $1.1 million this season, so essentially a vet minimum type of contract. The Raiders, no matter what, cut or traded, are going to eat $24,265. So again, it's not a lot of money. But if you're Munford, instead of being the bottom of the roster offensive lineman, could you potentially get an opportunity right after June 1st, right before training camp, right before mandatory minicamp? Like, if I'm Munford, I'm trying to get into a building right before mandatory minicamp to work my way right before training camp. So what do you guys have to say? Will Thayer Munford be on the Raiders this upcoming season? Give me a yes, give me a no. This will be the pinned comment on today's show, which means you're about to get in with a YouTube ad break. While that ad is playing, I want you to scroll on down. The number one question literally will be pinned to this video. Will Thayer Munford be on the Raiders this season? Give me a yes, give me a no. My answer right after this YouTube ad break. If I was a betting man, I would say no. Thayer Munford is not going to be on the Raiders this upcoming season. But I also think that you got to look at it a bunch of different ways where could he be? Yes. I'm going to say, though, right now, an 80 to 85% chance that Munford isn't going to be on this Raiders roster. Let's go to the other reason here of why I think that he could be done. The Silver and Black signed some offensive guards. Now, I know that Munford can play offensive tackle, and he's predominantly an offensive tackle. That's what he's been in the NFL. But I look back and I look at a lot of my notes on Munford, and I personally always thought he was more of an offensive guard prospect. But the Raiders went out. They signed Alex Cappa to a 2-year, $11 million deal earlier this offseason. Essentially, it was a 1-year prove-it at $5.5 million, but that's a John Spytek guy. So we know that Cappa is fighting for right guard, and right now it sounds like he is going to be the starting right guard for this team based on the reports, what we know right now. Left guard, it really is just a two-man race between Jordan Meredith and Dylan Parham. And the fact that I bring that up is because, let's face it, he's not taking left tackle's job, Colton Miller. He's not going to take right tackle job in DJ Glaze. And you know what? Even if Munford is better than the two players that the Raiders drafted this season, which I'll be real, I don't really think that he is right now. If I'm this organization and I'm going, Thayer Munford's a project. Do I want to invest in a 25-year-old project that I didn't draft that's got 1 year left on his deal? Or do I want to invest in the two players that I recently just drafted in Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant? The obvious answer there, the eye-roll answer is obviously this organization wants to invest in Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers. So because of that, Munford is in a difficult situation. Rogers plays left tackle, left guard, right tackle. Charles Grant is a raw swing offensive tackle prospect. So by going out and getting Rogers, by going out and getting somebody like Charles Grant, on top of the fact that you already went out and you still have Dylan Parham, you signed Alex Cappa, you brought in Jordan Meredith, Munford's got to be sitting there and watching all the moves that this organization did from free agency, before free agency, to the NFL draft. And if I was Munford and I was Munford's team, I'd go, yep, this team is clearly moving on from me. So we'll keep this thing moving here in just a moment. But before we do, if anybody's ever looking for some Raiders gear, I know Father's Day, it's right around the corner. And if you're like, man, I have no idea what to get my dad, I'll be real. My dad is a very simple person, and he always is asking for brand new clothes to wear. If you got the exact same thing, if you got a Raider dad out there, whether it's a sweatshirt, shorts, there's sneakers, there's hats, there's women's stuff, I saw a purse. If you're a guy watching the show, you're like, shit, just so I don't get put in the doghouse because I don't need any more Raiders gear. Because I know this, if I added more Raiders gear to my closet, Alex would be like, what the hell am I going to do with all this other stuff? Maybe you get your significant other something nice as well. Chatsports.com/Raiders sale. Again, that is RAIDERSALE. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments in the description of today's show. Everything at that link is on sale, so you better take advantage of it while supplies last. Let's go to the last thing here. Munford is clearly getting left behind. And when you're a player in a certain situation, I would almost think of it as like every athlete, I would imagine, that watches this show has that realization of, you know what, maybe I'm not good enough to make it on this team. Or you know what, maybe I'm not good enough to even be playing this sport anymore. I still think that Munford's going to get an opportunity, but the Raiders are clearly confident in DJ Glaze at right tackle. I mean, we know how much John Spytek values the trenches, and for the Raiders to take Ashton Genty and pass on a guy, like Kelvin Banks, for them to pass on a guy like Armin Membu, I think just tells you how confident they are in DJ Glaze, who's 22 years old. Dalton Wagner, he's been participating in OTAs, and I'm just going to tell you this. Wagner is more liked in that locker room than Thayer Munford. Yes, Wagner's 26, but he's also a right tackle prospect. Munford predominantly is going to work on the right side. They want Charles Grant to work on the left side. So if it's Dalton Wagner and Thayer Munford, and those are the two guys you got to scout right now, Wagner has that upper advantage. And then the last reason I'm going to bring up here is Laki Tassi, the Raiders International Pathway Program player. They have been using him as an offensive lineman when they need to go out and have an extra offensive lineman, let's call it like that. I bring that point up because really, the way that we've seen Thayer Munford on the field, and I don't think we're going to see it as much this year just because of how bad the O-line was last season or just in years past, but the Raiders used Munford as almost like that sixth offensive lineman. On PFF, it's labeled as a tight end because it's technically like the tight end roster spot. But if I'm the Raiders and I'm going, well, if that's what Thayer Munford's going to give me as that extra offensive line body, the Raiders are already even trying to replace him in that regard with Laki Tassi, who they have already used that as an offensive lineman. So now we're sitting up here going, all right, I could see the picture of the silver and black moving on from Munford. I could paint the picture of Munford being asked to move on from the Raiders. What do you think is more likely to happen? Do you think it's more likely that he's traded or that he's cut? I'm going to hit you with another YouTube ad break. While that ad is playing, scroll on down and give me your answer. I'm going to sit up here and go, there's an 80% chance that he's cut and a 20% chance that he's traded. Before I break down why I think he could end up being cut, I at least want to illustrate why I think that he could end up getting traded. Because if you're a football team, you got to look at the good and you got to look at the bad. If there's one thing that I'll always tell people, though, one of the things that I think we do here really well is we're going to make you a smarter Raiders fan. And anybody can sit up here and say, hey, Thayer Munford could be cut. Hey, Thayer Munford could be traded. I totally get that. I'm doing it right now. But I really do think that we've become the world's most watched Raiders show because we have a lot of fun, but I'm also going to teach you a thing or two about the Las Vegas Raiders that you can tell your friends, you can tell your kids, you can tell your mom or dad, and they're going to go, all right, he's at least not doing any shenanigans out there. Let's talk about Thayer Munford, though, and why I think he could be traded. If you looked at what Munford did last season, in 2023, PFF, he was much better. 521 snaps played, the overall grade of 74.1. Munford was clearly more comfortable with Carmen Bracillo. Now, I get it. Carmen Bracillo was really regarded as being a great offensive line coach, and the numbers show. 4 sacks allowed, only 1 penalty against, and he played a lot of right tackle. Hell, he even had to play a little bit of left tackle that season. But let's talk about him as a rookie. And as a rookie, he even showed you that he was a reliable offensive lineman. 369 snaps, that overall grade of 63.2. But then the stats of 4 penalties, 1 sack allowed, 4 pressures. Again, this is a limited sample size for Munford. But you saw as a rookie, like those numbers as a rookie is like, okay, that's something that I can grow with. Then he got better in 2023. You're going, okay, that's what I want to see. Then the Raiders go out and they draft DJ Glaze. Then Thayer Munford had a few different injuries last season, and he was a little bit unhealthy, no doubt about it. But the reason why I don't know if he's going to end up getting traded is because of the struggles that he had last season. To me, though, if you were to say, Mitch, who are the teams that are going to make the deal for Munford? I'm going to just throw out these 8 teams right here. The Patriots and Titans, I'll continuously say. McDaniels, he's with New England, part of the regime that drafted Munford here to the Raiders. Titans have Ziegler, again, part of the regime that drafted Munford. For the New York Giants, Carpenter Bracillo right now is that offensive line coach. And in 2022 and in 2023, Munford showed that he was pretty damn good in those teams. The Arizona Cardinals I'm going to throw in there because Munford's offensive line coach at Ohio State is now with Arizona. And then just between Baltimore, Seattle, Houston, and Indy, those are teams that need extra offensive line depth. So that's why I'm going to include them in this video. But, let's be real. This is the best trade that you're going to get. You're not going to get something wild and crazy. I mean, I'll be real. This could even be, hey, we'll give you a 7th-round pick, or, hey, we'll give you a 6th-round pick, and then the other NFL team gets a 7th from the Raiders, and they also get Thayer Munford. You could see a little bit of a pick swap in there, but I do really think that a trade doesn't happen, and I think he honestly ends up getting cut or asking to be released just because of the struggles he had last season. 201 snaps played, an overall PFF grade of 45.9, and in those 201 snaps, he had 10 pressures allowed and 5 sacks allowed. When Munford was on the field last season, he was clearly, and I mean clearly, the worst offensive lineman that we had, which was really unfortunate, and he was clearly not 100% healthy, and he was also a really bad fit in James Craig's system, which most people were. Now, I am always going to keep that glass half full because Munford does offer you some of that versatility. Again, played left tackle, played right tackle. That tight end number is not him meaning that he actually played tight end. He is that 6th offensive lineman when the Raiders wanted to bring in some of those jumbo packages, but that's what he can do. He also has played a little bit of guard at college, so maybe if you're an NFL team, you look at how bad he was last season, and he really struggled against speed. To any NFL team out there, I still think Munford can be a good offensive lineman, but I honestly would recommend lining him up at offensive guard. Appreciate all y'all tuning in to today's show, and a reminder, if you haven't already, give me a follow on IG and on Twitter at Mitchell Renz 365. I did this show simply because it's not looking good for Thayer Munford, and I could see the Raiders moving on from Munford. I could also see Munford asking to be moved on from by the Raiders.